Combat Review.
Bright Memory is our first early access combat review, where story takes a backseat as we just look at how good it feels to fight in this motion-based shooter. The game is not finished, of course, but maybe we can influence this one-man developer. So, here's the first action.
Hold position.
This is actually the very start of the game, thrown straight into the line of sight of 3 automatic weapon-toting soldiers. This is not ideal, and I hope it's just the early access nature of this demo to get the thing rolling while they finish up a proper introduction to the game.
It's so unstable.
Your pistol does a fine job on these, satisfying true semi-auto fire and good staggering on every other hit makes them dance nicely. Limb-based reactions too. For these low-tier soldiers, a single headshot usually kills, but since 2 shots anywhere else does the same, there's not much incentive to go for headshots. So that needs a bit of tweaking if the developer wants to properly utilise weak points on their enemies for more thoughtful play. 30 seconds later, you get an SMG. Now you can really forget about headshots, as this thing quite satisfyingly mows down the lower ranked soldiers. The weapon feels great to shoot, high fidelity sound, great rate of fire and pretty particle effects, but we now have a bullet sponge enemy thrown in that offers no unique way of taking down, so it's just an ammo and health sink.
Hang on, I'll be right there.
They really need to make that large metal backpack a weak spot that makes crunching sound and fancy particle effects when hit. Double damage and faster explosive death will work wonders there. Speaking of bullet sponges, we get a couple of these mid-tier enemies to pummel to death throughout this 30-minute demo. The more powerful sword attacks match up to these well as the only weapon that makes them flinch, which is very satisfying and has a good sense of weight and power. But while you wait for the cooldown, it's back to dumping clip after clip into them with a few dodge maneuvers in between. Smaller demon enemies also stagger from the sword attacks on every hit, unlike from gunshots that typically take 2 to 3 to draw any response. You get numerous special abilities in games, such as the EMP blast that suspends enemies in the air, particularly good for catching fast moving targets. Later upgrades see lightning bolts that damage and stun enemies at the same time, time warping bubbles to put an enemy on hold, and area damage effects to name a few. Gunplay requires you to use them as much as possible, as without them, the combat is going to get stale pretty fast. It's quite fun putting a few of these abilities to good use during a fight. I just hope they're introduced more slowly with specific levels and enemies built to complement the new powers they bring. An energy-based shotgun completes your trio of guns. Another true semi-auto weapon which feels great, clicking off a volley of rounds in quick succession. Problem is, these enemies still take 3 shots to put down, so you don't feel like it's doing much different from the SMG. No sense of power to the shotgun, and that's a shame. It needs to deal more damage than it is currently. Practically infinite ammo doesn't help either, as I recommend 2 possible fixes here. 1. Double the damage, keep semi-auto fire, and dramatically reduce the ammo availability, bringing some resource management into the gunplay. Ammo boxes can be hidden in the world, especially near boss fights. 2. Alternatively, double the damage, reduce the fire rate, and keep the plentiful ammo. This would become a quick punch style of weapon, better suited when darting between cover. It does look and sound very nice though, so kudos there. Blowing off heads and arms is especially fun with this one, but needs to happen on the first or second shot. There's enough enemies to throw in for that to happen with no problem. On that note, there is something odd going on with the gun projectiles, most notably with the shotgun, as when firing rapidly, enemies seem to absorb every other shot with no damage. 3 shots with a shotgun will kill, as seen here, but only are fired with a delay between shots. Rapid firing requires at least 6 shots to kill the same enemy. Some even survive an entire 10-round magazine. Are enemies invulnerable for a short time after taking a hit? I see it with the human soldiers too. It needs fixing, whatever it is. You don't need to play a hit animation each time a hit lands at that rate, but the damage still needs to register, otherwise what's the point of rapid fire? One of the excellent additions are these chaps holding the shield, which takes damage and eventually shatters. I do hope this is implemented in more exotic ways for the enemies in the final game. It gives you something to think about when choosing a target. Brute force it and smash through, or be more agile and attack from the side. A hidden weak spot behind the armour would be an excellent addition to these enemies too, especially if it was more susceptible to sword attacks. Then you could really mix it up for some tasty hack and slash gunplay. As things stand, it's a pretty basic shooter at its core with a healthy dose of visual flair. The combat never gets too engaging, however, as you simply sink clip after clip into enemies before you get too close. Even the boss fights fail to get the blood pumping, as their intensity varies little, just requiring more emptying of clips. The sword can stun, but it's very unclear how or when this should be used, and you just still end up emptying hundreds of rounds into a reactionless target either way. Overall, loads of potential here, and what a great base to build from. I wish the developer the best of luck to make this a fine shooting and slashing experience.
Finally.
Please consider supporting on Patreon.
I love it.